Hello everyone. Today I want to talk about the ego and our spiritual intelligence. We have both. However, we're only aware of our ego state. You heard of the term, you're being egoistic, as if that was a bad word. In reality, we all are egotistic. We're born into an environment. It's not your parents' fault or your guardian's fault. That's the way life is. Nature gave us a body and a mind. And you're born into an environment. You weren't a cause of your body or your mind. Nature gave it to you. So we are blessed with a body. However, our education comes from the environment we grew up in. So your parents, by nature, they were born into an ego environment. So it's passed on from generations to generations. However, we're more than ego. We have a spiritual intelligence, which we'll get into in a few minutes. But first, let's talk about the ego, the importance of the ego. I think, what is his name? I can't think of, Carl Jung. He really specializes in the ego and memory and the imagination and dreams. That is his, I guess, his study and his treatment of understanding of human nature. I think he did a good job, but he focused on the ego. And I think he talked about spirituality, but I think he was very confusing. See, I've studied Gurdjieff and Spinoza for the last 50 plus years. And especially in Spinoza's ethics, he talks about human nature and how do we free ourselves from the ego. But Spinoza does not talk about the ego. He talks about confusions in the mind and how we can come to clear thinking. First of all, though, to look at ourselves, to grow, to change, to improve oneself, we must look at the ego, our ego. So whenever you have a reaction, and I have reactions all the time, but why? Because we see things we don't like. We want things that don't happen. We're disappointed. We're rejected. We're in accidents or circumstances that causes problems. And we react. We react with pain, hate, and anger. Why? When your desires are not met, when your desires are not realized, you're instantly going into pain. Pain is a feeling of lack, a feeling of impotence, of powerlessness and helplessness. And at times we don't know what to do. So we go into hate, especially if someone rejected us or someone did something we disapproved of. We automatically go into pain and hate. What is hate? The definition of hate is pain. Again, pain. I feel pain. And I believe that person is the cause. Or you might be on your computer and your computer shuts down. The internet is off and you have an important call to make. An interview online or a doctor online. And it shuts down. You're in pain and you curse the computer. You curse the internet. Why? Because your desire was not met. So this is basically, as Spinoza would say, confused thinking. And confused thinking only means that our ideas are not clear. We have expectations. We live in the world of shoulds and shoulds not. Again, when our desires are not met, we go into pain, hate, and then anger. And what is anger? We want to break the thing. We want to hit that individual. We want to curse and scream and yell. But some of us who are highly intellectual, they don't express their emotions. However, an emotional person is screaming all the time, arguing all the time, complaining all the time. Intellectuals, They're silent, they're quiet. They don't want to look disturbed. But they are. They keep everything inside. They don't express their feelings or emotions. You know the type, you're probably married to one. If you're emotional, you're attracted to intellectuals. If you're an intellectuals, you're attracted to emotional people. All right. So the ego nature is our important place that we are in. It helps us preserve our existence. And so like I said, some of us are doing quite well in life. You might be educated. You might have a career. You might have a nice apartment or a house. You might have a nice family. And you may have a lot of money in the bank. You might have investments. You're doing great. Or you're not doing so good. You're living on Social Security. Or you're homeless. Or you're worried about paying the rent. So things are not going that well. Wherever you are, you must begin to look how you can improve your life. It's more difficult to look at your problems if you're very successful. Why should you look at your problems? You're focused on success and money. You know, this man, Jesus, he was a man. Highly educated in spirituality, he had an idea of God. He had an idea of human nature. He had great wisdom. And he said this: it's impossible for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven or crawl through an eye of a needle. Those are symbolic ideas. But it just says that when you're rich, that's all you think about is your wealth and your possessions. So when I met my teacher, I was successful business-wise. I had money, I had a home, I was married. Everything seemed great from someone looking at me. I remember someone came into my salon. I was a hairdresser at that time for about 25 years. I had a nice salon. There were 6 employees, receptionists, manicurists. Everything looked great. And Christmas Eve, it was packed. People were outside waiting to get in. And one of my clients says, "Boy, you are doing so well. You're so lucky. You're so fortunate." And I am. However, I was very dissatisfied. Why? Because I was in touch with my feelings of inadequacy. What were they? My mind. I dropped out of high school. I did not go to college. Why? Because my mind was not able to focus and concentrate. I was able to be a hairdresser. That was very good. But I worked with my hands. I was creative. But that's not enough. I was dissatisfied with the way I was thinking. I was married to a very intelligent woman. Her friends were intelligent, and I could not have a conversation with them at dinner time. Why? Because I felt inferior and inadequate. I couldn't contemplate. I couldn't reflect. I couldn't communicate. I was a great hairdresser. I cut hair, color, did all these great things with hair. But communication and listening and thinking, that was beyond me. So I met my teacher in 1970, and he talked about the mind, how the mind can be improved, and it took me another 30, 40, 50 years to understand how the mind works. So here I am, talking to you about the mind. Now Gurdjieff, I was first introduced to Gurdjieff in 1970. In the first couple of years, my teacher talked about Gurdjieff. Gurdjieff was very popular at that time. So Gurdjieff talked about the idea that we are asleep. And the idea is to awaken the intelligence and how to become a master of oneself. And that really interested me when my teacher talked about the idea of becoming a master of oneself. So I stayed with my teacher for over 20 years. And my ex-wife left the group, where she was involved for 8 years. She says, "I don't want this anymore." And I said, I could not stop. I was afraid to go back to where I was. So eventually my wife and I divorced and separated. And I remained with my teacher for another 16 years, 17 years. I'm so grateful to him, Gregory Grover. I love that man. Why? Because he introduced me to Spinoza and Gurdjieff. So the second birth is an awakened state. This is something that you want to understand what it is. I have my website, and I'll continue to talk about it. I have all these other videos talk about Spinoza. You can go on YouTube, and you can join Patreon. But again, you must be dissatisfied with where you are. You must want something more than what you have. You might have very little. And as I mentioned, Jesus, the man, was communicating to people who were poor, who were dissatisfied. He was murdered by the forces of the people who were in power. Could be the people in the Jewish religion who were powerful people, rich people. And there was the environment, Roman Empire, the authority. So they felt threatened by this man who talked about peace, love, compassion, contribution, giving, sharing. This was out of the authority of dictatorship, authoritarianism, or religious obedience. Thank you for listening.